Let's talk about one-star reviews in Japan, who leaves them, why they leave them, and what they actually mean. Because if you work with Japanese customers, students, or clients in any capacity, understanding this topic could save you a lot of unnecessary stress and very possibly your confidence as a service provider. First, let's talk about who is most likely to leave a one-star review in Japan. The honest answer is that it is not the average Japanese customer. Most Japanese people, as we have discussed in previous videos, avoid public complaints entirely. The ones who do leave one-star reviews tend to share certain characteristics. They are often people who are already carrying a significant amount of personal pressure, overworked professionals who have been pushed past their limit, perfectionists who expected a flawless experience and encountered anything less, or younger users who have grown up with social media and feel more comfortable expressing opinions online than older generations do. Occasionally, they are people who simply had a terrible day and found an outlet. The point is that the profile of a Japanese one-star reviewer is quite specific, and it is almost never the casual, relaxed customer who just felt like leaving feedback. Now, what does it actually take to push a Japanese person to leave the lowest possible rating? Given everything that Japanese culture teaches about keeping complaints private, avoiding public conflict, and thinking carefully before saying anything that could disturb the peace, leaving a one-star review is not a small decision for most Japanese people. It represents a level of frustration that is built up enough to override very strong social conditioning. Something has to feel genuinely serious, a sense of being disrespected, deceived, or significantly let down, before most Japanese customers reach for that one-star button. This is why, in Japan, a single one-star review often carries more weight than 10 one-star reviews might carry in a country where people review casually and frequently. The threshold is simply much higher. Here is something that might surprise you, but is actually one of the most important things to understand about Japanese one-star reviews. In many cases, they reveal more about the person writing them than about the actual quality of the service or product being reviewed. This is not unique to Japan. It happens in every country, but it is especially visible in Japan because of how rarely people leave extreme ratings. When someone does leave a one-star, the context of that review often makes it clear that the reviewer arrived with expectations that no service could realistically meet, or that they were already in an emotionally charged state before the interaction even began. A teacher who perhaps had a difficult week at work and wanted to feel in control during a lesson. A customer who had a very specific idea of what they wanted and felt that any deviation from that idea was a failure. A person who uses online reviews as a way to feel heard in a daily life where expressing frustration openly is socially discouraged. In these cases, the one-star is less a measurement of the service and more a window into the reviewer's internal state. This connects directly to Japan's broader culture around keeping complaints private. In Japanese society, expressing dissatisfaction publicly is considered a significant social act. Most people handle their frustrations quietly, through private conversations, by simply stopping the use of a service, or by processing their feelings internally. Because of this, public complaints are relatively rare and are viewed by other Japanese readers as meaningful and serious. When a one-star review appears on a Japanese platform, other users often pay close attention to it precisely because they know how unusual it is for someone to go public with a complaint. This means that one bad review in Japan can have a disproportionate impact compared to one bad review in a market where public complaints are common and expected. For service providers, this is important to understand, not so you become terrified of every unhappy customer, but so you recognize the actual weight of what you are dealing with when it does happen. Personal stress, overwork, and exhaustion play a genuinely significant role in triggering extreme negative reviews from Japanese customers. Japan has a well-documented culture of extremely long working hours and high professional pressure. Many workers spend 10, 12, or even more hours at their jobs regularly, with limited time for rest, personal expression, or emotional release. When people are running on empty, physically tired, emotionally drained, and feeling invisible in their professional lives, small disappointments can feel enormous. A service that does not meet expectations can become the final straw that releases weeks or months of bottled-up frustration. The review that gets written in that moment is not really about the lesson that felt slightly disorganized or the product that arrived a day late. It is about everything that has been accumulating. As a service provider, knowing this does not mean you absorb responsibility for someone else's stress. It means you have context for understanding why the reaction seemed so extreme relative to the actual situation. The generational gap in Japanese review behavior is also worth paying attention to. Older Japanese generations generally hold more strongly to the traditional values of keeping complaints private and maintaining public harmony. Younger Japanese people, especially those in their 20s and early 30s who grew up with smartphones, social media, and anonymous online platforms, are noticeably more willing to express opinions digitally. They have seen global internet culture, where reviews are casual, frequent, and direct. They have used platforms where anonymous feedback is normal and expected. This does not mean younger Japanese reviewers are reckless. Many still write carefully and with some degree of indirectness, but the barrier to leaving a public review is lower for this group than it is for people who grew up before the internet existed. What this tells us about changing social norms is that Japan's review culture is shifting, slowly but clearly, towards something that looks more like global digital behavior while still retaining distinctly Japanese characteristics. How can a service provider actually tell the difference between a one-star review that points to a real problem versus one that reflects the reviewer's personal frustration? There are a few patterns to look for. A review that describes a specific, verifiable event in clear detail, something that can be checked, confirmed, or responded to with evidence, is more likely to reflect a genuine service failure worth addressing. A review that is vague, emotionally charged, focuses on personality rather than specifics, or describes expectations that were never part of the service agreement is more likely to reflect the reviewer's personal state. In Japan specifically, watch for reviews that feel disproportionate to what is being described. If the written complaint is about something minor, a slight pause in the conversation, a moment of confusion over vocabulary, a format that differed slightly from what was expected, but the rating is the lowest possible, that gap between the complaint and the rating is itself useful information about where the review is really coming from. The most common complaints found in Japanese one-star reviews across various service categories tend to cluster around a few themes. Unmet expectations are at the top of the list. The customer had a very clear and often very specific idea of what they were going to receive, and the reality did not match that mental image. Communication issues come up frequently as well, particularly in service industries where the provider and customer come from different cultural or linguistic backgrounds. Perceived lack of respect or attentiveness is another common theme. Japanese customers have high expectations for being made to feel valued and carefully attended to, and when that feeling is absent, even briefly, it can register as a serious failure. What is notable is that many of these complaints are not really about a broken product or an objectively failed service. They are about feelings, expectations, and the quality of the interpersonal experience. One of the most interesting aspects of Japanese one-star reviews is that they are frequently written in polite, indirect, and carefully worded language, even when the rating itself is as extreme as it gets. A reviewer might describe being a little disappointed in language that is measured and formal while simultaneously giving the lowest possible score. This combination of polite language and extreme rating can be deeply confusing to foreign service providers who are used to a more direct connection between the tone of the words and the severity of the complaint. In Japanese communication, indirectness is not weakness or uncertainty. It is a trained skill and a sign of social awareness. When a Japanese reviewer writes something that sounds mild but rates 1 star, read the rating, not just the words. The words are shaped by politeness norms. The rating is the honest number. The concept of unmet expectations is worth exploring in more depth because it is arguably the single biggest driver of extreme negative reviews in Japan. Japanese consumers and service users generally operate with very high and very specific standards. This is a culture where precision matters, where details are noticed, and where the gap between good and perfect is taken seriously. When someone has built up a clear expectation of what a service will deliver, based on the description, the price, the platform, or simply their own mental picture, and that expectation is not fully met, the emotional reaction can be surprisingly intense. This is especially true for people who identify strongly as discerning or knowledgeable in a particular area. If they feel that a service was below the standard they consider appropriate for someone of their experience level, the disappointment is not just practical, it feels personal. Anonymity changes everything. When Japanese people interact face-to-face, the full weight of social norms, politeness expectations, and the discomfort of direct conflict shapes what they say and how they say it. Online, with the protection of a username and a screen, some of those constraints fall away. Not completely. Japanese reviewers are still generally more restrained than reviewers in many other countries, but the gap between public face and private feeling narrows considerably on anonymous platforms. This is why some reviews feel like they were written by a completely different person than the one who smiled and said thank you at the end of the interaction. They were, in a sense. The online version had permission to say things the in-person version would never voice. The timing of a one-star review also carries meaning. A review posted immediately after a bad experience tends to reflect raw emotion, anger, frustration, or shock that has not had time to settle. These reviews are often more intense in language and less precise in detail. A review posted days or weeks after the experience has had time to develop into something more considered, which can actually make it more damaging because the reviewer has had time to organize their thoughts and articulate exactly what bothered them. Neither type is more or less valid, but understanding the timing can help you gauge the emotional state of the reviewer and decide how to respond appropriately. For foreign businesses, online tutors, and content creators working with Japanese audiences, the single most important thing to internalize before letting a one-star review shake your confidence is this. In a culture where public complaints are rare, one extreme review does not represent the majority of your customers. It represents one person, on one day, with their own particular combination of expectations, stress levels, personal history, and communication habits. The customers who said nothing and came back, or said nothing and quietly left, make up a far larger and far more representative picture of your actual performance. Use the one star as information if there is something genuinely useful in it. Let it go if it is clearly more about the reviewer than about you. And keep working. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for Japanese and Korean language learning content, fun ESL class stories, sometimes even the toxic ones, plus videos about pets, plants, and anything interesting I discover in my daily life.